warriors, welcome back to Gods of Alliance. And if you're here, it means you want power, knowledge, and control over the battlefield. Because this is not luck, this is strategy. And today, we are stepping into something that actually changes how Tempus functions inside a fight. Because his relics are now live. And what we're looking at here is not just a simple upgrade path. Not just extra stats. Not just small improvements. But a full extension of his identity. Something that builds on what he already does and pushes it further, deeper, and more consistently into real combat scenarios. So what we're going to do right now is break everything down exactly as it is, step by step, level by level, connecting what each relic does with what actually happens in a fight, so you understand not just the description, but the impact. We begin with Relic Level 1, Chrono Field. And right from the start, the direction is clear. Tempus is not becoming a selfish hero. He is becoming more valuable to the team. Because every 15 seconds, he creates an aura around himself that lasts for 4 seconds. And during that window, he increases magic penetration for himself and all allies within that area. And that detail matters more than anything else. Because this is not just a stat increase, this is a shared window of power. A moment where your entire team becomes more effective at breaking through defenses, where damage that would normally be reduced suddenly starts to land with much higher impact. And the key part here is not just the number itself, but the timing, because this effect is not constant. It comes in intervals, which means it has to be understood and used. And when your damage aligns with that window, your output increases significantly. But if your abilities miss that timing, you lose part of the value. And that's where Tempus begins to separate players who understand tempo from players who don't. Because this is not passive value, this is controlled value. It requires awareness, positioning, and a sense of when your team is actually dealing damage. And when everything lines up correctly, your team doesn't just hit harder, it hits at the right moment. And that is what makes this first relic so important. Because it introduces the idea that Tempus is not just controlling time, he is creating opportunities for your team to convert that control into damage. Now we move into Relic Level 10, where things begin to evolve further. Because now we are not adding a new mechanic, we are expanding an existing one, Withering. And before this relic, the skill already had a clear role. It weakens distant enemies in front of Tempus by reducing their physical attack and their maximum health, which already creates both defensive and offensive value. Because lowering physical attack reduces incoming pressure while lowering maximum health makes enemies easier to eliminate. But with the relic upgrade, the skill changes in a way that increases its consistency. Because now instead of affecting a limited group of enemies, it expands to affect all enemies in front of Tempus. And this shift from selective targeting to wider application is what really matters. Because now you are no longer relying on specific positioning to weaken key targets. You are applying pressure across a broader part of the battlefield, and that has a direct effect on how stable your fights become. Because more enemies being weakened means less overall incoming damage, and more opportunities for your team to secure kills. And when you connect this with Chrono Field, the synergy becomes clear. Because now enemies are entering your damage window already weakened, already reduced in effectiveness. Which means that when your team gains magic penetration, they are not just hitting harder. They are hitting targets that are easier to break. And this combination builds consistency. It removes randomness. And it reinforces Tempus's role as a controller who prepares the battlefield before damage is even applied. Then we move into Relic Level 20, Time Paradox. And this is where Tempus transitions from pure control into something more complete. Because this skill already defines his identity by slowing enemies, speeding up allies, and increasing maximum health within its area, which already creates a massive advantage in tempo and survivability. But with the relic upgrade, this advantage starts to translate into direct pressure. Because now, every second, enemies inside the area take magic damage. And this changes how the skill feels in real fights. Because before, Time Paradox was about creating an advantage that your team had to capitalize on, but now it begins to convert that advantage automatically, meaning that while enemies are slowed and your team is faster, they are also taking constant damage, simply for being inside that zone. And this is important, because it removes the gap between control and impact. It ensures that even if your team is not perfectly synchronized, there is still pressure being applied. And when you combine this with the previous relics, you start to see a full sequence forming. Because enemies are first weakened by Withering, then your team gains a magic penetration window through Chrono Field, and then Time Paradox traps enemies in a space where they are slower, weaker, and continuously losing health. And this layered interaction is what turns Tempus into more than just a control hero. It turns him into a system that builds pressure over time and forces the enemy into disadvantageous positions. Finally, we reach Relic level 30, Time Rebound. And this is where everything changes in terms of interaction. Because until now, Tempus has been shaping the fight through his own actions. But now he begins to react to the enemy. Because every time an enemy applies a control effect to him, this relic triggers chronostasis on that enemy for 2.5 seconds. And this is not just another debuff. This is one of the strongest forms of control in his kit, because it completely stops the enemy from acting, preventing movement, attacks, skills, and even defensive responses. And what makes this even more powerful is that it is not triggered by Tempus actively using a skill. It is triggered by the enemy attempting to control him. Which means that control heroes now have to think twice before acting, because every attempt to disrupt Tempus can result in them being completely shut down instead. And this creates a very dangerous dynamic, because it forces the enemy into a dilemma where using control becomes risky, and not using it means losing tempo. And in both cases, Tempus gains the advantage. And when you connect this with the rest of his relic system, the result is extremely difficult to deal with. Because enemies are already weakened, your team is already hitting harder, they are already slowed and taking damage inside Time Paradox. And now any attempt to fight back through control can result in immediate punishment, effectively removing their ability to respond at key moments. When you step back and look at everything together, what you see is not a collection of separate effects, but a layered system, where each relic builds on the previous one to create a continuous flow of control, debuff, amplification, and pressure. And that is what defines Tempus after these relics. Because he is no longer just reacting to the battlefield, he is shaping it from start to finish. Controlling when damage happens, reducing enemy effectiveness, creating windows of opportunity, and punishing any attempt to disrupt him. And that level of control is what makes him so difficult to deal with in longer fights, because the longer the fight goes, the more value he generates, the more pressure he applies, and the harder it becomes for the enemy to regain control. So now the focus shifts, because understanding these relics is only the first step. The real question is how to use them, how to build around them, how to align your team's damage with his timing windows, how to position correctly to maximize Chrono Field, how to take advantage of Withering's wider debuff, and how to trap enemies inside Time Paradox for maximum impact. And that is exactly what we are going to explore next, because this is where theory turns into results. And this is where Tempus becomes not just a strong hero, but a defining piece of your strategy. Warriors, if you want to stay ahead of this, if you want to understand how to actually use this system in real fights, make sure you stay with us, because we are going to test this, break it, and show you exactly how it performs. And if you're serious about playing at a higher level, this is where you need to be. Because here we don't guess, we don't assume, we don't follow trends. We build understanding, we control outcomes, and we stay ahead of the game. And that's exactly what we're going to keep doing. This is how we play the game. Not randomly, not blindly, but with knowledge, with precision, and with control. And now with these relics, Tempus doesn't just slow the battlefield. He decides how it moves. And that is what makes him dangerous. So stay ready. Because what comes next is where we take this from understanding into execution. And that's where the real advantage begins. Warriors, this is how we play the game. Not randomly, not blindly. With knowledge, with precision, with control. We don't follow the meta. We break it. Let's break the game together.